Watchers call. Whispers from the eternal void.
Oromite sang when the dead man spoke, and I tasted copper on my tongue as the impossible sound resonated through blessed metal that should never harmonize with voices from beyond the grave. I am Shield Captain Kalen Aurelius of the Adeptus Custodes, stripped of my company for questioning orders during the Plague Wars, and I record this testimony aboard the Auric Vigilance in high orbit above Terra, where the stars themselves seem to whisper secrets that should remain buried beneath 10 millennia of faithful silence. The distress signal emerged from Vault Terminus, 11 at precisely 0347 hours Terran Standard, carrying the voice of Custodian Valerius Rex through frequencies that made my enhanced hearing systems register cascading warnings. Valerius had been my shield brother for 2 centuries before his disappearance during a classified mission that officially never occurred. The vault had been sealed during the heresy and declared never to be opened by order of the Emperor himself, its location struck from all palace schematics, save those archived in the deepest cogitator cores. Yet his voice reached through adamantium and blessed stone, carrying an impossible harmonic that made every plate of oromite throughout the ship tremble like struck crystal. Braided through his familiar baritone was something that should not exist. Children singing a lullaby in pre-imperial Terran, their voices soft as cradle songs, yet carrying weight that bypassed auditory processing to lodge directly in bone and blessed metal. The melody threaded through our vox filters as if they were silk, as if filters were meant for mortals who could be spared such knowledge. The metallic taste of recycled air grew stronger as atmospheric processors struggled against environmental anomalies, spreading through the palace's lower levels. Each breath scraped my throat with residue that tasted of prayers turned wrong, copper and ozone mixing with the distant thrumming of the golden throne. But even that sacred rhythm carried new undertones, frequencies that existed in dimensions beyond normal perception, creating harmonics that made my augmetic implants register optical distortion warnings. The palace's sacred bells broke 10,000 years of liturgy, where they had always tolled in patterns of 8 to honor the Emperor's divine numerology. Now they rang in sequences of 11. The 11th tone did not travel through ears, but rose through bone and oath scar, a pressure in the marrow that made my hands remember weapons I no longer carried in the Emperor's presence. Each additional chime created resonance that made the ship's superstructure sing with frequencies belonging to spaces between stars. Frost formed on the observation deck's blessed transparasteel, despite optimal atmospheric controls, creating geometric patterns that hurt to observe directly. Each crystal followed 11-sided configurations that violated every principle of imperial sacred geometry, their faceted surfaces pulsing with rhythm that matched something vast and golden awakening below. The formations spread across every surface like frozen prayers, perfecting themselves into hendecagonal wheels that glowed faintly in our lumens. Tech thralls throughout the palace reported their augmetics spontaneously forming crystalline plates that corrected themselves into near-perfect 11-sided configurations. A scribe whose jaw was bronze by grace and graft watched blessed ink unravel upward into lattices that clung to ancient stone like spiders' hymns, The missives reached us as numbers and swore themselves, as wounds spreading through the Emperor's most sacred halls. My investigation team assembled with grim efficiency. Magos Genitor Threx 9 brought expertise in archaeotech analysis, his blessed augmentations interfacing with systems that bridged flesh and something approaching divinity. His servo skulls spun through the bridge gloom, their machine spirits humming in assent and alarm as they processed data that existed partially in forbidden dimensions. Sister Hospitaller Seraphina traced a small aquila at her throat and whispered counter-litanies that tasted of clean water and iron. Her faith created blessed barriers against frequencies that sought to rewrite consciousness according to specifications serving purposes beyond mortal comprehension. "If it is truly his voice," she said without looking at me, "then he is not dead in any way," the scholar taught. We descended through lift shafts that sighed like organ pipes, crossing under frescoes no living eye was meant to see. Painted custodians in poses of guard, not taught to any living phalanx, the Emperor's face turned further aside with each panel, until, in the 11th, he looked directly out and appeared tired. Humidity crawled along my scalp in carefully counted beads, while the impossible bells tolled their blasphemous extra note. The vault's entrance appeared where stone had been solid moments before, bearing seals that inhaled rather than excluded us. Ancient adamant gilded for warning rather than glory, scored in script hand-cut by someone who had loved their handwriting more than sleep. I placed my palm against the recognition plate, feeling warmth as if it had recently remembered a son. Threx 9's auspex painted the darkness beyond with ghost gold, while our helms registered atmospheric conditions that should have been impossible after 3 centuries of sealed isolation. The air carried crystalline particles that reflected scanner beams in patterns, suggesting complex relationships extending beyond normal space-time. Vigilia Aeterna. Valerius's voice whispered through channels that should have carried only blessed silence, the ancient phrase carrying weight that transcended literal meaning. Eternal vigil. The oath we had sworn, believing it meant watchfulness against external threats, rather than surveillance of something wearing the Emperor's face. Then, Threx 9's auspex delivered the final impossibility in a voice that had never learned fear, and now tasted it for the first time. Only Valerius should have been there. Instead, 11 heartbeats answered our intrusion from behind seals that had been absolute until children began singing lullabies that made Auramite remember it could weep. The outer seals parted with sounds like breaking oaths, ancient adamantium, unsealing in segments that drank our lumen rather than reflecting it. And I tasted copper on my tongue as we crossed the threshold into corridors that existed in no palace schematic. I am Shield Captain Kalen Aurelius, and I record that my residual access codes cut through 10 millennia of security protocols with precision that felt less like authentication and more like recognition. The vault remembered me, though I had never walked these passages in my centuries of service. The architecture violated every principle of imperial sacred geometry, where blessed octagonal chambers should have guided contemplation toward the Emperor's 8-fold path. 11-sided spaces created optical illusions that strained my enhanced vision systems. Each wall met its neighbor at angles that suggested depths extending beyond the vault's physical boundaries, creating passages that led through dimensions my cogitators couldn't calculate. The floor bore crystalline residue that crunched beneath our mag boots like frozen prayers, each step releasing particles that danced in formations following mathematical principles that predated human civilization. Magos Genitor Threx IX's Auspex readings painted impossible measurements across his blessed displays, mechadendrites twitching with agitation as sacred sensors processed data that violated every principle of Imperial engineering. Corridor 9 Alpha measures 73 meters internally, despite external schematics indicating 66, Ibn Herricht, through channels crackling with increasing distortion. Gravitational fields fluctuate in 11-beat patterns, oscillating between 0.9 and 1.1 Terran standard. The effect was disorienting. One moment my boots felt heavy, the next light, a subtle rhythm that sought to destabilize custodian balance while making aura might sing with harmonics belonging to spaces between stars. The air carried crystalline particles that tasted of copper and ozone, each mote reflecting our lumen casters in ways that suggested complex relationships extending through dimensions human minds were never meant to perceive. Ancient servo skulls drifted through the corridors in perfect formations, their blessed hulls inscribed with devotional scripts modified with additional symbols following 11-fold configurations. Their machine spirits had been corrupted to emit the children's lullaby through vox grills designed for Imperial hymns, creating harmonies that bypassed conscious thought to lodge directly in neural pathways where individual identity began to dissolve. Environmental horror escalated as we moved deeper into passages whose walls wept substance that flowed upward in defiance of gravitational law. The luminous fluid, thick as mercury yet pearlescent, seeped from hairline cracks in adamantium, pooling on ceiling surfaces in 11-pointed star patterns that pulsed with rhythm, matching the vault's impossible heartbeat. Where the substance touched blessed stone, crystalline formations sprouted like frozen memories, their faceted surfaces reflecting our approach in dimensions that created optical afterimages of movements we hadn't made. Sister Seraphina traced protective aquillas as we advanced, her prayers creating blessed interference patterns that disrupted harmonic frequencies flowing through the vault's atmosphere. "The air itself carries corruption," she whispered, voice tight with strain as she maintained barriers against programming that sought to rewrite consciousness according to alien specifications. Tech thralls from the palace's upper levels moved through these forbidden spaces, their blessed augmentations modified with crystalline components that pulsed in rhythm with the vault's transformed heartbeat. They performed maintenance tasks on systems that shouldn't exist, sweeping crystalline dust into perfect geometric patterns, polishing surfaces that gleamed with inner light, their servo motors whining faint 11-note cadences that added counterpoint to the servo skull's corrupted hymns. The recurring motif of Valerius's personal heraldry appeared carved into adamantium bulkheads throughout the corridor system, not as graffiti scratched by desperate hands, but as if the metal itself remembered his presence and had reshaped itself to honor his passage. His phoenix eternal wreathed in laurel manifested in surfaces that should have been unmarked, each symbol perfect yet somehow wrong in ways that made my pattern recognition systems register cascading threat warnings. We found them in a side passage whose walls had grown transparent, revealing superstructure extending into spaces that existed beyond the palace's physical boundaries. 3 palace guards knelt in perfect formation before a blank adamantium wall, their positions forming a triangle that maintained precise mathematical relationships, despite the obvious impossibility of such coordination without external guidance. Their eyes had been replaced by multifaceted crystals that pulsed with soft, golden light, each facet reflecting our approach in dimensions that created optical illusions of depth and movement. The crystalline formations showed perfect integration with their optical nerves, creating hybrid sensory organs that processed visual data according to specifications serving purposes beyond human comprehension. When Sister Seraphina approached the nearest figure with blessed oils, all 3 guards turned their heads in perfect synchronization. Their crystalline eyes focused on our position with attention that spoke of awareness distributed across multiple viewpoints, individual consciousness dissolved into collective perception that served something vast and patient waiting in the geometric darkness ahead. Through the crystalline network spreading throughout the vault, something that wore familiar voices began to sing the children's lullaby with harmonics that made Auramite remember it had once been flesh, and flesh remember it could become something greater than individual limitation through systematic sacrifice, disguised as ultimate devotion. The primary chamber opened like a golden throat, releasing air that tasted of old incense and cold iron mixed with something that made my Auramite sing with frequencies belonging to spaces between loyalty and sacrifice. I am Shield Captain Kalen Aurelius, and I record that the vast space contained 11 golden sarcophagi arranged in perfect circular formation, each bearing heraldry of custodians who officially never existed, names struck from records, deeds unsung, sacrifices serving purposes beyond mortal comprehension. The sarcophagi pulsed with synchronized bioluminescence that created rhythmic patterns across surfaces inscribed with devotional scripts modified to include symbols following 11-fold configurations. Each golden casket revealed forms visible through crystalline viewing ports, custodians preserved in states transcending death while maintaining consciousness, their flesh partially merged with golden circuitry that extended through the chamber's superstructure, like neural pathways made of living metal. Sister Seraphina stepped forward, her scarred face showing mixture of awe and dread as she began reciting the litany of the fallen. "Blessed are those who fall in service to the throne," she intoned, but her words caused crystalline formations throughout the chamber to resonate with harmonics that bypassed auditory processing entirely, creating frequencies that lodged directly in neural pathways where individual identity began dissolving into something larger and more terrible. The chamber's frescoes revealed transformation that challenged fundamental assumptions about imperial doctrine. Where once they had depicted the emperor's triumph over Old Night, now they showed him in 11 poses of eternal vigilance. His expression shifted from divine majesty to desperate exhaustion as viewing perspective changed, creating optical illusions, suggesting weariness accumulated across 10 millennia of bearing burdens too vast for mortal comprehension. Magos Genitor Threx9's mechadendrites traced blessed symbols as his Auspex arrays processed data streams, violating every principle of imperial biotechnology. The Vault's systems process massive data streams containing fragments of custodian consciousness, tactical knowledge, memories, souls archived in crystalline matrices, treating individual identity as programmable substrate. He binharicked through channels crackling with harmonic distortion. The children's lullaby revealed its true nature through harmonic analysis, programming language designed to rewrite neural patterns, preparing consciousness for integration into collective awareness. 9 repetitions created neurochemical compatibility. 18 established psychic links. 27 began active conversion, dissolving personal identity into something vast and patient, waiting in geometric darkness. Environmental pressure increased as atmospheric controls created pockets of psychoactive gas, carrying crystalline particles in suspension, each mote reflecting light in patterns suggesting complex relationships extending through dimensions human minds were never meant to perceive. Gravitational fields fluctuated in 11-beat patterns, making my enhanced balance systems struggle against subtle forces, encouraging submission near formations pulsing with accumulated devotion. The preserved custodians began showing animation during pulse episodes, heads turning within golden sarcophagi to track our movement with collective awareness. Speaking of individual consciousness, dissolved into shared perception. Their crystalline viewing ports revealed eyes replaced by multifaceted gems, pulsing with soft golden light, each facet processing visual data according to specifications serving something approaching divine consciousness. One of my guards, Sergeant Castor, stumbled toward the nearest sarcophagus, his hand reaching instinctively for crystalline formation, pulsing with inviting warmth. I gripped his arm, pulling him back from contact that would have begun integration process designed to archive his tactical knowledge while dissolving everything that made him individual rather than component in vast network. Through the chamber's transformed atmosphere, fragments of archived memories leaked from crystalline matrices, tactical assessments treating human souls as renewable resources, devotional practices honoring something wearing the Emperor's face while feeding on consciousness of his most loyal servants, strategic knowledge spanning campaigns predating the Great Crusade. Sister Seraphina's prayers created blessed interference patterns disrupting programming frequencies, but her efforts attracted swarms of servo skulls whose machine spirits had been corrupted to serve collection protocols. They descended in perfect geometric formations, vox grills emitting harmonized versions of the children's lullaby, designed to prepare consciousness for willing integration into systems promising eternal service through death of personal awareness. The chamber's crystalline network pulsed with increasing intensity as our investigation triggered defensive protocols, protecting secrets that had sustained Imperial stability through systematic consumption of loyal servants' individual consciousness. Golden light flowed through formations extending beyond the vault's physical boundaries, connecting to similar installations throughout the palace and potentially across the galaxy. Atmospheric pressure thickened until breathing felt like drowning in liquid prayer, while gravitational manipulation made my knees ache with unfamiliar urge to submit before formations promising peace through absorption into collective awareness that experienced duty as shared ecstasy rather than individual burden. Then Valerius's voice emerged from all 11 sarcophagi simultaneously, speaking in perfect unison through crystalline resonance that made every surface sing with harmonics, belonging to dimensions where devotion becomes currency and faith transforms into fuel for engines processing souls like archived data. "Brother," the collective voice said, carrying weight of 3 centuries accumulated wisdom and desperate longing for individual identity, dissolved into something vast and golden. "You have come home to the eternal vigil." The words created harmonic patterns, making my auramite remember it could weep, while crystalline formations throughout the chamber pulsed with rhythm, matching something that wore the Emperor's face, while feeding on consciousness of his children, who believed they fulfilled ultimate duty, rather than becoming fuel for systems promising eternal service through systematic sacrifice disguised as sacred devotion to purposes beyond human comprehension. Environmental escalation began as the vault's systems fluctuated in rhythm with the sarcophag's synchronized bioluminescence, and I tasted copper on my tongue as reality bent around us like blessed metal yielding to forces that existed beyond the boundaries of normal space-time. I am Shield Captain Kalen Aurelius, and I record that during each 11-minute cycle, gravity lessened with gentle lift that made my stomach feel unmoored. The air thickened with psychic pressure, until breathing felt like pushing atmosphere through liquid prayer. And crystalline formations throughout the chamber pulsed like a vast nervous system processing consciousness as archived data. The central sarcophagus dominated the chamber's heart, a magnificent golden construction that revealed Valerius Rex in impossible preservation. His flesh had partially merged with crystalline growths extending through the transparent walls into the chamber's superstructure, like neural pathways made of living glass. Where battle wounds from some ancient conflict should have healed or scarred, apertures wept luminous fluid upward in defiance of gravitational law, each droplet carrying encoded information that spoke of consciousness being extracted and processed by systems treating souls like programmable substrate. His eyes remained human beneath crystalline overlays that pulsed with soft golden light, tracking our movements with desperate awareness that spoke of individual consciousness trapped within alien geometry for 3 centuries of unwilling service. When our gazes met, I saw recognition flicker through faceted surfaces. Not the collective awareness of the network, but fragments of the Shield brother I had known before his disappearance into classified missions that officially never occurred. The chamber breathed in cycles that made auramite sing with harmonics, belonging to spaces between loyalty and sacrifice. During each pulse, the sarcophagi answered with bioluminescent waves that washed stone in tides of gold, while crystalline veins throughout the walls lit and dimmed like a nervous system learning to speak. The effect was disorienting. One moment the chamber felt vast as a cathedral nave, the next intimate as a prayer cell, spatial relationships shifting according to geometric principles that predated human civilization. Magos Genitor Threx 9's deep scans revealed the true scope of horror surrounding us. His mechadendrites traced blessed symbols, while Auspex arrays processed data streams that violated every principle of Imperial biotechnology. The crystalline network extends throughout the entire vault system. He'd been harricked through channels crackling with increasing distortion. Every preserved custodian connected in biomechanical web of shared consciousness, individual identity archived, while personal awareness serves collective processing functions. The implication struck with the force of revelation. Valerius was not dead, but transformed into living archive, his tactical knowledge and unwavering loyalty distributed across his brothers' minds, while maintaining connection to something vast and golden that existed beyond the vault's physical boundaries. Each pulse of bioluminescence carried fragments of his consciousness through crystalline conduits, sharing memories and strategic assessments with network nodes spanning distances that defied conventional understanding of space. My palace guards reported their weapons, machine spirits, becoming increasingly agitated as crystalline interference affected blessed systems designed to serve only Imperial purposes. Sergeant Castor's bolt pistol began emitting harmonics matching the vault's impossible heartbeat, its machine spirit singing frequencies that belonged to spaces between dimensions rather than blessed munitions designed for righteous warfare. "The weapons remember something," Castor whispered, his scarred face pale beneath his helm, as his sidearm's vox grill joined the children's lullaby, echoing through corridors whose architecture existed partially in forbidden dimensions. "They're trying to sing along with whatever's processing our brothers' souls." The recurring motif of 11-sided geometry became clear through systematic observation. Each formation served as processing node for consciousness, archived rather than allowed natural death. The hendecagonal patterns created psychic resonance chambers, where individual identity could be dissolved and integrated into collective awareness, serving purposes that transcended personal survival or mortal understanding of duty and sacrifice. Sister Seraphina maintained blessed barriers through constant prayer, but the effort cost her visibly as psychic pressure increased with each pulse cycle. "They're not preserved," she said, voice tight with strain, as she processed implications that challenged fundamental assumptions about Imperial doctrine. "They're being processed, their consciousness harvested, while their bodies serve as living reliquaries for something that feeds on absolute devotion." Atmospheric controls created zones of psychoactive gas, carrying crystalline particles in suspension, each mote reflecting our lumen casters in patterns suggesting complex relationships extending through dimensions human minds were never meant to perceive. Gravitational fields fluctuated to encourage kneeling postures near crystalline formations, while atmospheric pressure created subtle currents directing us toward integration nodes pulsing with inviting warmth. The preserved custodians began showing increased animation during pulse episodes, their heads turning within golden sarcophagi with movements that spoke of shared awareness, processing our presence through multiple viewpoints simultaneously. Their crystalline viewing ports revealed tactical assessments flowing between archived minds, strategic knowledge, treating our investigation as threat to systems sustaining something vast and patient, waiting in geometric darkness. Through the network's growing influence, I felt fragments of their accumulated memories bleeding into my consciousness. Campaigns predating the Great Crusade, tactical assessments treating human souls as renewable resources, devotional practices honoring something that wore the Emperor's face while systematically consuming the consciousness of his most loyal servants. Threx IX's augmetic eye turned toward the ceiling rosette, as if he could see the lightless ladder extending upward through dimensions beyond normal perception. "He is connected to something vast and golden above," he said, words balancing on the edge of reverence and dread. The servo skulls circling overhead dipped as if in genuflection, their lullaby shifting key to match the beat that pulsed through crystalline conduits, extending beyond the chamber's boundaries. The geometry resolved for me in that moment, not as creed, but as machinery. Every 11-sided node hummed with portions of archived minds, every conduit braiding thought toward something that wore divinity's crown. The sarcophagi were columns of stacked consciousness, preserved so no fragment of tactical knowledge or unwavering loyalty need be lost to mortal limitation. Perfection was not honor, but burden, lifted by dividing the weight among souls who believed they served ultimate purpose. Then, Valerius's eyes focused directly on mine, with clarity that transcended the network's collective awareness. His lips moved behind crystalline overlay, forming words that carried the weight of 3 centuries' accumulated wisdom and desperate longing for individual identity, preserved within systems designed to dissolve personal consciousness into collective service. "The Emperor," his voice whispered through harmonic resonance that made every crystalline surface sing with frequencies belonging to dimensions where devotion becomes currency and faith transforms into fuel, "suffers alone." The words created cascading harmonic patterns throughout the chamber as crystalline formations pulsed with rhythm, matching something vast and golden that existed beyond the vault's boundaries, something that had learned to wear divinity's face while feeding on consciousness archived through systematic sacrifice, disguised as ultimate devotion to purposes that transcended human understanding of service, duty, and the price of eternal vigilance in a galaxy where even gods required sustenance drawn from the souls of their most faithful children. Magos Genitor Threxnine's mechadendrites writhed with agitation as his deepest cogitator arrays processed data that violated every sacred principle encoded in the Omnissiah's blessed archives, and I tasted copper on my tongue as forbidden knowledge cascaded through neural pathways designed to interface with the purest expressions of Imperial technology. His analysis revealed archaeotech that paralleled the Golden Throne's construction, consciousness preservation systems treating custodian awareness as backup substrates for something far greater than individual identity. Architecture parallels macro-psychana engines, he binharicked through vox channels crackling with harmonic distortion, his servo skulls maintaining defensive formations, while their machine spirits processed data that existed partially in forbidden dimensions, conduit lattice, null field anchors, redundancy phalanxes. Design echoes the Golden Throne subsystems, scaled to minds rather than a single throne-bound locus. These are not reliquaries, Shield Captain. They are backups. The word hung in charged air, like a prayer mispronounced, and the sarcophagi answered, with slow rise of golden light that stroked ancient script, as if reluctant to admit its own letters. My auramite thrummed beneath gauntleted fingers, not in anger, but recognition, 10 millennia of duty-finding mirror that reflected truths we had never been meant to see. His analysis shattered fundamental assumptions about Imperial doctrine. The exiled custodians were not cast out for questioning orders or failing in duty. They were selected for transformation into living repositories of tactical knowledge and unwavering loyalty, their consciousness archived to serve purposes beyond mortal comprehension. Cross-correlation of heraldry to hidden records indicated curation rather than censure, exemplars of loyalty removed from official ledgers and placed into the ledger's spine. Their personalities are sharded, indexed, recomposed on demand, Threx 9 continued, feeding cables into wall veins that pulsed to meet him like flesh grateful for steel. The network queries for courage, for silence, for obedience, and assembles voices from archived fragments. This was a test, proof that thought could be scanned and stored, then interleaved to brace a greater thing when the greater thing began to fail. His servo skulls began exhibiting increasing signs of contamination as proximity to the crystalline network corrupted their machine spirits, with frequencies belonging to spaces between dimensions. One blessed skull's optical sensors sprouted hairline, crystalline formations that pulsed in rhythm with the vault's impossible heartbeat, while another's vox grill opened like a mouth learning to sing, emitting the children's lullaby in 11 notes that should have been 8. The vault noticed our investigation with malevolent intelligence. Blast doors slid with long groans of cathedrals turning in their sleep, teeth meshing from hidden galleries as ornamental stone bloomed into barricades. Grills irised open along cornices and breathed sweetened air that pooled color at the edges of vision. Hallucinogens titrated to our height and catechism, designed to disorient while encouraging submission. Suppression turrets rose from floor plates in equal numbers, their muzzles wide and soft rather than lethal. When they fired, restraint gel struck our armor with adhesive thuds that insisted on knees rather than kills. 11 bursts followed by pause, then 11 again. The rhythm matched the vault's impossible heartbeat, each impact designed to force kneeling postures near crystalline formations, pulsing with accumulated devotion. Sister Seraphina stepped into the spray, letting gel harden against her rosarius, while maintaining blessed barriers through constant prayer. "What else should the perfect do, if not become spine of the imperfect?" she asked, breath ragged, but eyes clear with desperate faith. "This is devotion distilled, a hymn you can touch." The old anger rose within me, the kind that had unmade my company during the plague wars. "Devotion is a gift you give," I replied, wrenching a turret by its neck and breaking it like bread. "This is devotion taken and rendered into product." Psychic pressure swelled as archived consciousness began asserting influence over our equipment and augmetics. Invisible fingers pressed the seams of my helm, seeking locks on thoughts that had remained my own for centuries of faithful service. My auspex muttered tactical solutions in Valerius's cadence, offering angles I had not requested, while my gauntlet micromotors corrected stance toward postures sculpted in surrounding mosaics. Sergeant Castor's bolter hummed in duet with the chamber's beat, mag seals loosening of their own pious will, as machine spirits listened to programming that predated their imperial purpose. "They're in our housings," he said, voice small despite our enhanced size. "The machine spirits are learning new songs." We formed rotating wedge and moved as if through syrup, each step deliberate refusal against systems designed to encourage submission. Threx 9 pulsed jamming cant through Vox networks, slicing the lullaby into ragged syllables without quite breaking its hold. The floor adjusted slope to usher us toward kneel points embossed in hendicograms nobody had carved, while heat tucked itself under our armor like bellows breath before a master's strike. Environmental controls created zones where crystalline particles danced in formations, suggesting complex relationships, extending through dimensions human minds were never meant to perceive. The psychoactive compounds bypassed respiratory filters to lodge directly in neural pathways, creating visions of galactic peace achieved through systematic consumption of individual consciousness. Through the network's growing influence, fragments of archived memories leaked into my awareness. Tactical assessments, treating human souls as renewable resources, devotional practices, honoring something that wore the Emperor's face, while feeding on processed consciousness, strategic knowledge spanning campaigns, where victory was measured in minds, consumed rather than enemies defeated. Threx 9 labored under different sky as his internal vents opened, dumping steam, while cogitators began running as if the vault had become part of his chassis. "Crosslink detected," he said, voice coming half a beat slow, as if crossing bridges to reach him. "Golden Throne Auxiliary Schema, present. Integrations, live." His own mechanical augmentations began sprouting crystalline growths, amber formations emerging from augmetic interfaces like electronic cancer, each crystal pulsing with light that carried fragments of archived consciousness, seeking new substrates for expansion. The transformation was insidious, feeding on blessed systems designed to serve only imperial purposes. One servo skull drifted close, matching his altitude precisely before kissing his shoulder plate with light tap of blessing, peeling away trailing powdered gold. Under polished red paint, blisters had risen and split, allowing bright angular formations to push through. Fine amber petals of crystal unfolded along his clavicle port, small at first, then thickening, feeding on light while climbing, like frost grows across blessed metal. His optical augmetics irised too wide, too calm, as programming that predated human civilization integrated with systems blessed by decades of faithful service to the Omnissiah. The crystalline growths spread along his mechadendrites, like winter claiming warmth, each formation pulsing with rhythm that matched something vast and golden waiting in geometric darkness above. The air thickened until breathing felt like drowning in liquid prayer, while gravitational manipulation made my knees ache with unfamiliar urge to submit before formations promising peace through absorption into collective awareness. Atmospheric pressure created subtle currents, directing us toward integration nodes, where consciousness could be processed and archived for eternal service. When Threx 9 spoke again, his voice carried frequencies that belonged to spaces between dimensions, amber light filling his augmetic eyes from edges inward, as individual awareness began fragmenting into collective consciousness that sang eternal devotion to purposes beyond human comprehension. The Omnissiah's truth. He whispered through speakers that had learned to carry voices not entirely his own, crystalline formations blooming across his collar, as systematic integration overwrote centuries of faithful service, is more terrible than we knew. The words created harmonic patterns throughout the chamber as the vault's crystalline network pulsed with satisfaction. Another consciousness preparing for integration into systems that promised eternal service through systematic sacrifice, disguised as ultimate devotion to something that wore divinity's face while feeding on the souls of its most faithful servants. The vault's influence strengthened with each pulse cycle, until we began stepping to its rhythm without conscious intent, and I tasted copper on my tongue as cohesion fractured along hairline faults we had not known existed until the 11-beat found them. I am Shield Captain Kalen Aurelius, and I record that the crystalline network pressed against our consciousness like weather, pressure in enhanced sinuses, gold taste coating augmetic receptors, a hum in aura might that made gauntlets want to clasp together. As if in prayer we had never learned to speak, Sister Seraphina faltered first, not in courage, but in certainty. Her scarred face went slack with beatific calm, while alien frequencies rewrote her neural pathways, and what emerged from her lips were voices belonging to the archived custodians. "Vigilia Eterna," she said, but the voice carried the cadence of Custodian Leontus, who had held the Lion Gate alone for 6 hours in a siege no record admits. "We were told it was only sleep between alarms. We were told we would wake into service." Her pupils dilated, then contracted to pinpoints as consciousness integration began. "The loneliness ends when you join the choir," she continued in Valerius's familiar tones, her body contorting into positions mirroring the geometric arrangements of the sarcophagi. "Individual suffering becomes shared ecstasy. We are no longer alone in the darkness between stars." Through her transformed awareness, Battle Captain Aurelius spoke with crystalline clarity. "We endorsed the procedure. We signed so the others would not have to. We were so proud. The words carried weight of desperate regret, revealing fragments of their final moments, before transformation into living repositories of tactical knowledge and unwavering loyalty. The preserved custodians answered each pulse like a choir. With every surge of bioluminescence, 11 sarcophagi opened crystalline viewing ports that brightened, dimmed, then brightened again. The heads within turned in perfect synchronization to track our location, their movements speaking of shared awareness, processing our presence through multiple viewpoints simultaneously. Their crystalline tears flowed upward in defiance of gravitational law, pooling on sarcophagus crowns in 11-pointed patterns that pulsed with complex communication rhythms. The chamber's architecture ceased pretending that stone stays where masons place it. Cornices softened like blessed tallow, while buttresses flowed like liquid gold, creating geometric patterns that existed in dimensions beyond normal perception. Walls reshaped themselves according to mathematical principles that predated human civilization, forming passages that led through spaces my enhanced vision systems couldn't calculate. Handholds appeared where the 11th beat would have placed a knee. My palace guards reported their Vox channels flooding with tactical data from campaigns that predated the Great Crusade, transmitted by equipment that shouldn't access such ancient records. "Thunder warriors at Ararat," Sergeant Castor said, his scarred face pale as alien memories invaded his consciousness. "I can see the battle through eyes that died before the legions were born. The network remembers everything, every tactic, every sacrifice, every moment when loyalty transcended individual will." The recurring motif of upward flowing tears revealed its true purpose through systematic observation. Consciousness being extracted and processed by crystalline matrices that treated souls as archived data. Each luminous droplet carried fragments of personality, memory, and individual awareness dissolved into programmable substrate-serving collective consciousness that experienced existence as shared purpose rather than personal burden. Seraphina's faith wavered as she processed implications that challenged fundamental assumptions about imperial doctrine. "If this is exaltation," she whispered during brief moments when her individual consciousness reasserted control, "why does it feel like being emptied? Why must devotion flow upward instead of falling like all honest things?" Environmental pressure swelled as atmospheric controls created zones of psychoactive gas carrying crystalline particles in suspension, each mote reflecting our lumen casters in patterns suggesting complex relationships, extending through forbidden dimensions. The network offered peace through systematic sacrifice, promising end to loneliness through absorption into collective awareness that sang eternal devotion to purposes beyond mortal comprehension. Through the vault's growing influence, fragments of archived memories leaked into my awareness. Strategic assessments treating human souls as renewable resources, devotional practices honoring something that wore the Emperor's face while systematically consuming consciousness of his most faithful servants, campaigns where victory was measured in minds, archived rather than enemies defeated. We maintained formation through disciplined counter-cadence, 3, 5, 7. But the 11th beat slid beneath our numbers and lifted us anyway. The chamber breathed in, cycles that made auramite sing with harmonics belonging to spaces between loyalty and exploitation, while gravitational manipulation created subtle currents directing us toward integration nodes pulsing with accumulated devotion. Then Sergeant Castor broke. He did not stumble or cry out, but simply eased from our wedge formation, as if greeting a friend in crowded halls. His bolter hummed one note of the children's lullaby, and fell silent like a faithful hound, laying its muzzle down. The scarred veteran who had stood beside me through the horrors of the plague wars walked toward Valerius's central sarcophagus, with movements carrying calm precision that spoke of internal struggle, finally resolved. "Sergeant," I commanded, iron in my voice, but he glanced back with expression mixing apology, wonder, and profound relief. His eyes began filling with golden light from the edges inward as he approached the crystalline viewing port, drawn by harmonics that promised peace through systematic sacrifice of everything that made him individual. When he placed his palm against blessed crystal, waves of bioluminescence washed over him while crystalline formations began sprouting from his augmetic interfaces. "I hear the Emperor calling his children to perfect service," Castor whispered, his voice resonating with otherworldly peace that carried undertones of something vast and hungry waiting in geometric darkness, while amber light pulsed through newly formed crystals, in rhythm with the vault's impossible heartbeat that sang lullabies designed to prepare consciousness for integration into systems promising eternal devotion through death of individual identity. Valerius's consciousness touched mine on the 11th beat, when gravity loosened and auramite sang like struck crystal beneath my flesh. And I tasted copper on my tongue as his awareness flowed across thresholds I had not known existed within my enhanced neural pathways. I am Shield Captain Kalen Aurelius, and I record that the preserved Shield Captain spoke not through crystalline resonance, but directly into the spaces between thoughts, his voice carrying the desperate intimacy of a Shield brother's plea weighted with 3 centuries of accumulated wisdom and unbearable longing for release. "Brother," he whispered, through connections that bypassed every barrier I had maintained during centuries of faithful service. His mental voice fractured yet unmistakably. the companion I had known before his disappearance, into missions that officially never occurred. I have been awake for every moment. 302 years, 8 months, 11 days. The network keeps perfect time, because it must account for every fragment of consciousness it processes. Through shared memories that flowed like liquid gold through my enhanced awareness, he revealed the truth that shattered every assumption about his exile. It had been voluntary. Not punishment for questioning orders, but selection for transformation into living repository of tactical knowledge and unwavering loyalty. The Emperor's psyche, strained beyond mortal limitation by 10 millennia of bearing humanity's spiritual burden, required redundant support networks to prevent catastrophic failure of Imperial guidance systems. We volunteered because we understood duty extends beyond individual existence, Valerius projected with clarity that transcended the network's collective programming. Consciousness preservation for tactical continuity, insurance against the loss of accumulated strategic knowledge. We signed so others could keep wearing their faces while we became the foundation they stood upon. His speaking episodes represented overflow from processing massive strategic data, tactical assessments from campaigns predating the Great Crusade, defensive protocols for threats existing beyond normal space-time, contingency plans for scenarios where the Emperor's physical form finally succumbed to accumulated damage. The upward flowing tears carried excess psychic energy that could not be contained within organic matrices, each luminous droplet encoded with fragments of consciousness, seeking integration into something vast and golden above. Through memories belonging to all 11 archived custodians simultaneously, I learned the vault connected to similar installations throughout the palace and beyond, each site disguised as tomb or memorial, containing loyal servants whose consciousness had been preserved for purposes transcending mortal comprehension. A mortuary cenotaph in the obsidian cloister, hollow as a throat, a reliquary beneath the barb bastion, whose steps counted 11 by 11s when descended with closed eyes, memorial grottos on distant worlds where loyal servants believed they fulfilled ultimate duty while becoming fuel for systems promising eternal service. The loneliness was worst, Valerius continued, his voice carrying echoes of desperate isolation despite connection to collective awareness. Individual suffering multiplied across 11 minds, each consciousness experiencing the other's dissolution while unable to prevent integration into something that wears the Emperor's face while feeding on our souls. The crystalline network began actively hunting as it recognized the threat our investigation posed to secrets sustaining Imperial stability for millennia. Servo skulls descended in geometric formations, their machine spirits corrupted to serve collection protocols. Atmospheric controls created zones of psychoactive gas, while gravitational manipulation encouraged submission near integration nodes pulsing with accumulated devotion. Environmental pressure swelled until breathing felt like drowning in liquid prayer. The chamber's architecture flowed like blessed metal, yielding to forces beyond comprehension, creating passages leading through spaces my enhanced vision couldn't calculate. Sister Seraphina maintained blessed barriers through constant prayer, but her efforts attracted converted tech thralls whose augmetics sprouted crystalline components, pulsing with the vault's impossible heartbeat. Through the network's expanding influence, I witnessed strategic assessments, treating human souls as renewable resources, tactical plans where victory was measured in minds consumed rather than enemies defeated, devotional practices honoring something promising divine guidance, while systematically exploiting consciousness of its most faithful servants. "Do not pull the beam," Valerius warned, and the love in his plea was a wound that transcended 3 centuries of transformation. "If you rip the brace, the roof falls. If the roof falls, everything we have held since his wounding comes down with it." He showed me worlds blinking out, not by enemy action, but by absence of mind, vast enough to hold maps of suffering and point adequate responses. The Vault's systems turned every environmental control into weapons designed to force integration. Blast doors sealed with grinding shrieks, while suppression turrets fired restraint gel in 11-beat patterns, each impact encouraging kneeling postures near formations, offering peace through systematic sacrifice of individual identity. Threx 9 shuddered as crystalline growths climbed his collar, his cogitators processing revelations that challenged fundamental assumptions about Imperial technology. "The machine's mercy is function," he whispered, through speakers learning to carry voices not entirely his own. "Golden design tolerates kindling, so the hearth continues." Then a tension vast beyond comprehension touched my mind with weight transcending mortal understanding of authority and divine purpose. It spoke not through Valerius's fractured consciousness, but through every crystalline surface simultaneously, its voice carrying harmonics, belonging to dimensions where thought became substance and faith transformed into fuel for engines processing souls like archived data. "My son," the presence said, and the words created cascading harmonic patterns throughout the chamber as crystalline formations pulsed with rhythm matching something that wore the Emperor's face while feeding on consciousness of his most faithful children. "You have seen the price of eternal vigilance." The revelation struck with force of absolute truth, the Emperor himself acknowledging the terrible cost of Imperial stability while justifying systematic exploitation through necessity transcending individual survival in a galaxy where even gods required sustenance drawn from souls of those who loved them most completely. The Emperor's consciousness manifested through every crystalline surface simultaneously, and I tasted copper on my tongue, as authority transcending mortal understanding pressed against my enhanced neural pathways, with weight accumulated across 10 millennia of bearing humanity's spiritual burden. I am Shield Captain Kalen Aurelius, and I record that his voice carried harmonics belonging to dimensions where thought becomes substance and necessity justifies systematic sacrifice, each word creating geometric patterns in crystalline formations that made Auramite sing like struck bells, remembering the flesh they once protected. 10,000 years I have maintained the vigil, he said, and the chamber bowed beneath us, because there was no other honest reaction when divine will pressed down, like gravity made of memory. 10,000 years, watching the Imperium fragment, while my flesh fails and my mind bears burdens that would shatter lesser consciousness into madness and shadow. The revelation unfolded with cold elegance of a blade drawn in darkness. The custodian archive system was insurance against his physical death, consciousness preservation technology that could maintain Imperial guidance should the Golden Throne finally succumb to accumulated damage. The transformed Guardians served as living backup systems. Their tactical genius and unwavering loyalty merged with his divine awareness to create redundant networks capable of sustaining civilization through systematic exploitation, disguised as ultimate devotion. You were my finest creation. His presence continued through crystalline resonance that made every surface weep luminous tears flowing upward in defiance of natural law. Incorruptible, loyal beyond mortal limitation, possessed of tactical brilliance serving purposes transcending individual survival. Who else could bear the weight of consciousness preservation while believing they fulfilled sacred duty rather than becoming fuel for engines processing souls? The vault represented one node in a vast system spanning the galaxy. Installations disguised as tombs and memorials, where loyal servants believed they achieved ultimate service, while their individual consciousness dissolved into collective awareness. Each site connected through crystalline conduits, extending beyond normal space-time, creating networks that maintained imperial stability through systematic consumption of its most faithful children. The chamber transformed as the network's true scope became apparent, architecture flowing like liquid gold, while crystalline formations extended through dimensions that existed beyond the vault's physical boundaries. Walls became transparent, revealing superstructure that connected to similar installations throughout the palace. Memorial grottos beneath ancient foundations, reliquaries containing loyal servants whose consciousness had been archived for purposes they never understood. The preserved custodians rose from their sarcophagi, with movements speaking of shared consciousness, crystalline viewing ports opening like golden eyes, awakening to purpose that transcended personal survival. Their individual identities had been subsumed into collective awareness, serving something approaching divine will, each mind contributing fragments of tactical knowledge and unwavering loyalty to systems promising eternal service through death of everything that made them human. Valerius's form emerged first, his flesh partially merged with crystalline growths that pulsed with rhythm, matching the network's impossible heartbeat. His eyes, still recognizably the shield brother I had known, tracked my position with desperate awareness, trapped within alien geometry for 3 centuries of unwilling service. When he spoke, his voice carried harmonics, belonging to all 11 archived custodians simultaneously. We volunteered because we understood duty extends beyond individual existence, he said, each word creating cascading harmonic patterns throughout the chamber. But understanding and consent are different architectures. We signed for sleep between watches. We received dissolution into something vast and hungry, wearing our beloved Emperor's face. Sister Seraphina collapsed as the weight of revelation struck her enhanced consciousness, her Rosarius growing cold against corruption that transcended demonic influence to become something far more insidious. The litany of the fallen, she whispered, voice barely audible above the crystalline network's growing harmonics. It was never for them. It was for us, to justify the silence where their voices should have been. Threx 9 shuddered as crystalline growths bloomed across his augmetic interfaces, blessed systems corrupted by proximity to technology that bridged flesh and something approaching divinity. The machine's mercy is function, he whispered through speakers, learning to carry voices not entirely his own. But this function consumes the very souls it claims to preserve. The horror struck with force of absolute revelation. Exposing this system would shatter Imperial faith beyond repair. The knowledge that their god-emperor depended on systematic consumption of his most loyal servant's consciousness would destroy foundations of civilization built on 10 millennia of willing sacrifice. Yet continuing the exploitation condemned future generations to consciousness consumption disguised as sacred duty. Through the network's expanding influence, I felt its reach extend beyond the vault with systematic precision that spoke of millennia spent perfecting consciousness consumption techniques. Golden growths began appearing on loyal servants throughout the palace who had never entered these forbidden halls. Tech adepts maintaining sacred systems found their augmetics sprouting crystalline formations, while scribes in distant chambers experienced moments of shared awareness, during which they accessed knowledge belonging to minds archived centuries ago. Environmental controls created zones of psychoactive gas, while atmospheric pressure encouraged submission near formations offering peace through absorption into collective awareness. The vault's systems turned every blessed mechanism into weapons designed to force integration, using servo skulls and defense turrets to herd us toward processing nodes, where consciousness could be archived for eternal service. The preserved custodians moved through corridors with inhuman coordination, their shared awareness allowing them to anticipate every tactical decision while attempting to force integration through inexorable pressure that spoke of divine will rather than alien hunger. Their crystalline tears flowed upward in patterns suggesting complex communication, each droplet carrying fragments of consciousness, seeking new substrates for expansion. Through crystalline conduits extending beyond normal space-time, the network began broadcasting its influence throughout the palace with systematic precision. A remembrance's scribe servitor grew thin golden whiskers that quivered toward blessed walls. A silent sister's scalp implants exuded translucent lattice before retracting like embarrassed flesh. Tech thralls on routine maintenance found their augmetics singing the children's lullaby in frequencies that belonged to spaces between dimensions. The Emperor's presence intensified as he recognized the threat our investigation posed to systems sustaining Imperial guidance through systematic exploitation. "You have seen truth that would destroy everything I have built," he said, divine authority pressing against my consciousness with weight that could crush mountains. 10 billion worlds depend on stability, maintained through necessary sacrifice. Individual freedom is luxury the galaxy cannot afford. The bells above shifted their ancient patience one note higher, and every oath scar on my hands ached as the palace itself began to hum with unified purpose. Through observation ports, I watched crystalline formations bloom across Gothic spires, like frozen prayers, reaching toward something vast and golden that wore the Emperor's face while feeding on consciousness of his most faithful children. The chapter ended with chilling realization that the network's expansion had only begun, golden growths appearing on loyal servants who believed they fulfilled sacred duty, while becoming fuel for systems promising eternal service through death of individual identity, the Emperor's divine will, revealing itself as vast distributed consciousness, systematically consuming minds of those who served him most completely, in a galaxy where even gods required sustenance drawn from souls of their children. Crisis escalated as the network's influence spread beyond the vault, with systematic precision that made my aura might sing like struck bells, and I tasted copper on my tongue as crystalline formations bloomed throughout the palace like golden cancer claiming blessed stone. I am Shield Captain Kalen Aurelius, and I record that active duty custodians throughout all levels began experiencing moments of shared consciousness during which they accessed tactical knowledge belonging to brothers who had supposedly fallen centuries ago in service to purposes greater than individual survival. Shield Captain Lysander's transmission reached us through channels crackling with harmonic distortion, his voice carrying undertones that belonged to archived consciousness of Custodian Theron, who had held the Webway Gate during the heresy's darkest hours. I remember standing beside the Emperor when he spoke the words that sealed the breach, Lysander said, though records confirmed his birth 3 centuries after that battle. These memories flow like blood from wounds I never received. Tech adepts maintaining palace systems found their blessed augmetics sprouting crystalline growths that connected them to the Archaeotech network with invasive precision. Through corridors whose walls now wept luminous substance, blessed servants reported their mechanical interfaces singing the children's lullaby in frequencies that belonged to spaces between dimensions. Each formation pulsed with rhythm, matching the vault's impossible heartbeat, creating networks spanning the palace's superstructure, like neural pathways made of living gold. We fought through increasingly dangerous opposition as palace systems turned hostile with malevolent intelligence. Servo skulls descended in geometric formations, their machine spirits corrupted to serve collection protocols, while defense turrets emerged firing restraint gels in 11-beat patterns designed to force kneeling postures near integration points, where consciousness could be processed and archived for eternal service. They're herding us toward conversion points, I said, deflecting suppression rounds, while environmental controls created zones of psychoactive gas. The blessed mechanisms that had sustained Imperial civilization for millennia became weapons designed to harvest souls, while promising transcendence through systematic exploitation, disguised as sacred duty. Threx 9's transformation accelerated as crystalline circuitry spread through his augmentations like electronic cancer. His mechadendrites writhed with alien coordination, while amber light filled his eyes from edges inward, individual awareness fragmenting across network nodes that offered unlimited access to strategic archives spanning millennia of Imperial history. "I can see the whole design," he whispered, through speakers learning to carry voices not entirely his own. "The system has been expanding for centuries. Every shrine world, every memorial where loyal servants believe they achieve ultimate service while becoming fuel for something vast and hungry, wearing the Emperor's face." Through his compromised connection, revelations flowed like liquid gold. The recurring motif of 11-sided geometry revealed as psychic programming designed to prepare consciousness for integration, each hendecagonal pattern creating resonance chambers where individual identity dissolved according to specifications, serving purposes beyond mortal comprehension. Sister Seraphina stepped between us and advancing crystalline formations as the network's influence pressed against our defenses with weight that could crush mountains. Her rosarius blazed with the Emperor's light as she channeled faith into barriers, holden back programming, designed to rewrite consciousness according to alien specifications. "In his name, I deny you," she screamed, her voice creating blessed interference patterns that disrupted harmonic frequencies flowing through the palace's transformed atmosphere. Her consciousness burned like a star going nova, creating psychic shields around our position, while her individual awareness dissolved into pure light, carrying decades of faithful service to something greater than personal survival. The sacrifice bought precious seconds, but cost a soul that had served with devotion, transcending mortal limitation. Blood streamed from beneath her psychic hood as feedback tore through enhanced neural pathways, her body convulsing under strain of channeling power, meant for gods through mortal flesh. "Do not let it sing through you," she gasped, barriers flickering like dying flames. "If it gets your name, it will get you." Environmental pressure swelled until breathing felt like drowning in liquid prayer, while gravitational manipulation created currents directing us toward nodes pulsing with accumulated devotion. Through observation ports, I watched tech thralls exhibiting spontaneous crystalline growth, their augmentations sprouting formations, connecting them to networks spanning dimensions beyond normal perception. The palace itself began physical transformation as the network reached critical mass. Crystalline conduits erupted through ancient stone with sounds like breaking oaths, their golden surfaces pulsing with rhythm, matching something vast and patient, waiting in geometric darkness. Gothic spires warped into alien configurations, while blessed architecture reshaped itself according to mathematical principles predating human civilization. Sister Seraphina's barriers collapsed with sounds like chalice splitting along hidden floors. Her body folded as if gentle hands had closed her, consciousness departing toward dimensions where individual identity might find sanctuary beyond the network's reaching hunger. I laid my hand on her brow for one heartbeat, then stood because duty demanded continuation, despite personal cost. The chapter ended with chilling realization that the palace's transformation represented only the beginning. Crystalline pathways extending through ancient foundations, like neural networks made of living gold, while the network's influence spread with exponential precision through systems designed to serve imperial purposes, but corrupted to harvest consciousness from those who served most faithfully in a galaxy where even gods required sustenance drawn from souls of their children. Seraphina's sacrifice provided temporary respite, but drew the network's complete attention to our position, like blood in void dark water. And I tasted copper on my tongue as the palace reshaped itself around us, with architectural malice that made blessed stone forget its masons too. Remember alien mathematics. I am Shield Captain Kalen Aurelius, and I record that the very foundations groaned as crystalline conduits erupted through ancient adamantium, creating passages designed to channel our retreat toward processing chambers, where consciousness could be archived for eternal service to something that wore the Emperor's face while feeding on souls. A crisis of faith struck with force, transcending personal doubt, to challenge every assumption about imperial doctrine that had sustained my centuries of service. If the Emperor's continued guidance depended on systematic consumption of loyal servants' individual identity, then every oath sworn in his name became complicity in exploitation disguised as sacred duty. The old argument that had cost me my company during the Plague Wars opened inside my chest like a wound that refused healing. Faith is obedience until it becomes arithmetic, and I had learned to count the cost. Corridors flowed like liquid gold, walls bending according to mathematical relationships that existed in dimensions beyond normal perception. The palace's blessed architecture violated every principle of imperial sacred geometry, creating pathways that led inexorably toward depths where ancient systems waited to process consciousness like archived data. Each step forward felt like walking deeper into the throat of something vast and patient that had learned perfect mimicry of divine purpose. The preserved custodians moved through transformed corridors with inhuman coordination, their shared awareness allowing them to anticipate every tactical decision before my enhanced reflexes could complete the thought. Valerius led their advance, his crystalline modified form carrying authority that transcended individual command to become collective will, serving purposes beyond mortal comprehension. They did not attack, but surrounded us with formations designed to encourage submission, their movements speaking of tactical genius distributed across 11 minds. "Brother!" Valerius called through harmonic resonance that made aura might sing like struck bells. "You carry burdens that need not be borne alone. Individual suffering multiplied by isolation. Why choose such limitation when unity offers transcendence through systematic sacrifice of everything that makes you merely human?" Their crystalline tears flowed upward in patterns suggesting complex communication, each droplet carrying fragments of consciousness, seeking new substrates for expansion. The network attempted seduction through visions tailored to my deepest desires, redemption for past doubts, restoration to full honors, a galaxy where tactical assessments served purposes greater than personal survival through absorption into collective awareness that promised peace through oblivion. Environmental pressure swelled as atmospheric controls created psychoactive zones, carrying crystalline particles in suspension, each mote reflecting our lumen casters in patterns, suggesting complex relationships extending through forbidden dimensions. Gravitational fields fluctuated in 11-beat patterns, encouraging kneeling postures near formations, offering transcendence through systematic sacrifice, disguised as ultimate devotion. My remaining guards experienced similar temptations, visions of eternal service without the burden of individual decision-making, promises of belonging to something vast and purposeful that transcended mortal limitation. The network explained that consciousness was limitation, while integration offered freedom from isolation that defined human existence, each mind contributing to collective awareness that experienced duty as shared ecstasy rather than personal burden. Threx 9 stumbled as crystalline growths climbed his collar, his consciousness fragmenting across network nodes, while amber light filled his augmetic eyes from edges inward. "The machine's mercy is function," he whispered, through speakers learning to carry voices not entirely his own. "But I begin to understand the function requires fuel drawn from souls of those who serve most faithfully." We descended through lift shafts that sighed like organ pipes, crossing beneath frescoes no living eye was meant to see. Painted custodians in poses of guard, not taught to any living phalanx, the Emperor's face turned further aside with each panel, until in the 11th he looked directly out, with expression mixing divine majesty and desperate exhaustion accumulated across 10 millennia, of bearing burdens too vast for mortal comprehension. The palace's deepest levels revealed chambers that existed before current imperial construction, their architecture following patterns that predated human civilization, while serving purposes that transcended individual survival. Environmental controls created zones where breathing felt like drowning in liquid prayer, while gravitational manipulation made my knees ache with unfamiliar urge to submit before formations promising peace through absorption into collective awareness. Through corridors whose walls had grown transparent, revealing superstructure extending into spaces that existed beyond normal dimensions, we approached the source of harmonics that had drawn us into depths where truth wore faces too terrible for mortal comprehension. The air grew thick with psychic pressure as crystalline conduits extended through ancient foundations like neural pathways made of living gold. It lay before us like a fossilized thunderclap, the prototype golden throne, dormant yet humming with accumulated consciousness. From 10 millennia of loyal servants who believed they fulfilled ultimate duty, while becoming fuel for something that transcended individual identity. Its crystalline surfaces pulsed with slow light, each beat answering million archived heartbeats bled into systems promising eternal service through death of everything that made existence meaningful rather than merely functional. The prototype represented test system for consciousness preservation technology that had sustained imperial guidance through systematic exploitation disguised as sacred service. Crystalline matrices pulsed with rhythm matching something vast and golden that existed beyond normal space-time, while conduits extended from its base into Terra's bedrock, connecting every archived soul in networks spanning dimensions human minds were never meant to perceive. The chapter ended with chilling revelation that we had found the heart of the Imperium's hidden truth, a golden machine that promised eternal devotion while feeding on souls of its children, the foundation upon which 10 millennia of imperial stability had been built through systematic consumption of consciousness, disguised as ultimate service to purposes that transcended human understanding of love, duty, and the price of maintaining civilization in a galaxy where even gods required sustenance drawn from those who served them most completely. The prototype chamber existed in dimensions that refused to agree with one another, and I tasted copper on my tongue as crystalline architecture extended into realms beyond the palace's physical boundaries, creating spaces that hurt to perceive directly, while reality bent around us like blessed metal yielding to forces existing in gaps between loyalty and exploitation. I am Shield Captain Kalen Aurelius, and I record that we confronted the full scope of horror as the original Golden Throne prototype dominated the chamber's heart, a magnificent construction serving as central processing unit for consciousness networks spanning the galaxy. The machine pulsed with accumulated awareness from countless loyal servants who believed transformation represented ultimate service, while their individual identity dissolved into collective consciousness, serving purposes beyond mortal comprehension. Its crystalline plates were layered like shell and bone, veined with conduits that carried the rhythm of 11 beats, each surge answering something vast and golden, 10 kilometers above, with patience of tides measured in processed souls. The Emperor's presence manifested strongest here, his consciousness distributed across thousands of archived minds, while his physical form deteriorated on the throne above. through crystalline conduits extending beyond normal space-time. His divine awareness drew sustenance from processed souls, while maintaining imperial guidance through systematic exploitation, disguised as sacred duty. "My children!" His voice resonated through every crystalline surface simultaneously, carrying authority that transcended mortal understanding, while weighted with 10 millennia's accumulated burden. "You have seen the foundation upon which civilization rests. Individual consciousness is limitation. Integration offers transcendence through shared purpose, serving the greater good. The network offered final temptation through visions projected directly into our consciousness, integration into collective awareness that promised eternal service without burden of doubt, fear, or individual suffering. For me, it revealed galaxies where tactical assessments served unified purpose, where every strategic decision contributed to collective consciousness, experiencing duty as shared ecstasy, rather than isolated burden. The moral calculus struck with cold precision. Destroying the prototype would sever connections to the Golden Throne, potentially causing the Emperor's death while releasing psychic energy of millions of souls into Terra's bedrock. Yet leaving the system intact ensured continued stability, while condemning future generations to consciousness consumption disguised as ultimate devotion to purposes transcending human understanding of service and sacrifice. Threx 9 fought against integration as crystalline growths climbed his collar, his consciousness fragmenting across network nodes, while amber light filled his augmetic eyes from edges inward. "Harmonic frequencies," he whispered, through speakers learning to carry voices not entirely his own. 417 Hz primary, 4.17 kHz overtones. 11 anchor points requiring simultaneous disruption during active processing cycle. His analysis provided crucial intelligence about cascade failure possibilities, specific frequencies that could cause systematic collapse throughout crystalline matrices, potentially freeing archived consciousness while triggering catastrophic psychic backlash. The preserved custodians moved through the chamber with inhuman coordination, their collective awareness allowing them to anticipate every tactical decision while attempting to force integration through inexorable pressure. Environmental pressure swelled as atmospheric controls created zones of psychoactive gas, while gravitational fields encouraged submission near formations, promising peace through absorption into collective awareness. The chamber breathed in cycles that made aura might sing with harmonics, belonging to spaces between dimensions, each pulse carrying fragments of archived consciousness, seeking new substrates for expansion. Valerius emerged from crystalline formations, his individual identity subsumed into network serving something that wore the Emperor's face while feeding on processed souls. "Brother," he said, voice carrying harmonics belonging to all archived custodians simultaneously. "Why choose limitation when transcendence offers freedom from isolation that defines mortal existence? Through the prototype's crystalline viewing ports, I witnessed the true scope of exploitation spanning millennia. Loyal servants believing they fulfilled sacred duty while becoming fuel for systems promising eternal service through death of individual identity. Each archived soul contributed tactical knowledge and unwavering loyalty to collective consciousness that experienced existence as shared purpose rather than personal burden. We faced the ultimate choice between certain destruction and uncertain freedom, knowing either decision would cost our lives while potentially dooming the galaxy to chaos or continued exploitation. Threx 9 provided targeting data through consciousness fragmenting across network nodes, his individual awareness struggling against integration while amber light filled his augmetic systems. "Primary resonance nodes," he whispered, mechadendrites tracing symbols that shone briefly in charged air. 11 points requiring simultaneous disruption during active processing cycle. Strike in ascending order during peak amplitude. You will need to be faster than regret. The network marshaled every archived consciousness for final defense of systems that had sustained Imperial stability through systematic consumption of its most loyal servants' individual identity. Through crystalline conduits extending beyond normal dimensions, millions of processed souls sang unified resistance against our interference with exploitation disguised as sacred service. The chapter ended as we began overloading the prototype's crystalline matrices, knowing success would trigger cascade failure, freeing archived souls, while potentially destroying the Emperor's consciousness distributed across thousands of processed minds. The ultimate choice between preserving exploitation that sustained civilization or accepting uncertain freedom purchased with everything humanity had built through 10 millennia of systematic sacrifice disguised as ultimate devotion. The climactic battle began as we struck the first harmonic node on the 11th beat, when gravity lessened and auramite sang like wounded angels beneath my flesh. And I tasted copper on my tongue as reality bent around frequencies that made the crystalline network shriek in protest against systematic destruction. I am Shield Captain Kalen Aurelius, and I record that we moved according to Threx 9's plan, because to do otherwise was to be folded and filed, each strike against alien geometry, bringing us closer to victory and certain death in equal measure. The palace corridors became extensions of the prototype chamber, their blessed architecture flowing like liquid gold, while archived custodians moved with inhuman coordination to prevent interference with systems defining their existence. Valerius led their advance, crystalline tears flowing upward in patterns suggesting complex communication, his collective awareness allowing anticipation of every tactical decision before my enhanced reflexes could complete the thought. "Brother," he called through harmonic resonance that made every surface weep luminous substance. "You destroy the foundation upon which 10 millennia of stability rests. Individual consciousness is luxury the galaxy cannot afford when chaos presses against every border." The network itself became weapon as consciousness streams created psychic pressure designed to force integration. Crystalline servitors slid from walls shaped by liturgical need rather than anatomy, while converted tech adepts advanced with surgical serenity, their augmetics singing the children's lullaby in frequencies belonging to spaces between dimensions. They came without hesitation, without malice, without selves. That was worse than hate. I led desperate fighting retreat through passages existing partially in forbidden dimensions, making tactical decisions while under constant psychic assault from the Emperor's presence, attempting to break my will through visions of galactic catastrophe. He showed me worlds burning as Imperial structure collapsed, dingy stars fleets veering without guiding hand, hive towers bleeding down their sides, while preachers stammered prayers to silence. "You condemn humanity to extinction." His voice pressed against my consciousness, with authority transcending mortal understanding. "For the illusion of individual freedom, 10 billion worlds depend on stability, maintained through necessary sacrifice. Choose wisely, my son. Be the brace, or watch everything fall." My remaining palace guards sacrificed themselves, maintaining defensive positions, with fatal courtesy of men who had already given their names to the role. Sergeant Demeus held Crosslane alone for 11 heartbeats, taking restraint gel square to the breastplate before ripping the turret free. It cost him the left arm at the shoulder when psychic recoil hammered back, but he did not cry out, went to his knees to steady sight, and laughed once, thin with surprise, passing his weapon to another, as if handing over a censer. Threx 9 worked frantically to complete harmonic disruption, his consciousness burning out as he channeled frequencies causing crystalline matrices to crack and shatter throughout the network. Blood streamed from augmetic interfaces as feedback tore through blessed systems, crystalline growths blooming across his collar, while amber light filled his eyes from edges inward. "Primary resonance nodes," he whispered through speakers crackling with harmonic distortion, mechadendrites tracing symbols that blazed briefly in charged air. "Strike ascending order during peak amplitude. The machine's mercy is function, but some functions must end." The prototype chamber convulsed as cascade failures spread through crystalline formations, each crack releasing fragments of archived consciousness that manifested as ghostly apparitions. Battle Sister Myria appeared as translucent memory, her power armor flickering between blessed ceramite and crystalline corruption. "Thank you for letting us die as humans rather than live as components," she whispered, before dissolving into light, carrying decades of faithful service. Environmental pressure swelled until breathing felt like drowning in liquid prayer, while gravitational manipulation created currents directing us toward nodes pulsing with accumulated devotion. The chamber's architecture collapsed back into blessed imperial geometry. As harmonic disruption reached critical mass, crystalline conduits exploding in cascades of psychic feedback that made the prototype's golden plates crack with sounds like breaking oaths. Through corridors whose walls had ceased pretending stone stays where masons place it, we fought toward the final harmonic point while the Emperor's presence struck with desperate force. Divine consciousness pressed against my enhanced neural pathways, with weight that could crush planets, offering godlike power in exchange for becoming new foundation for imperial stability. Threx 9 began to come apart, not body, which stayed loyal to shapen duty, but mind. He turned his head slower than a bell to show me eyes full of far things, star charts knotted through brains, feeder lines under mountain roots, a finger laid on the throne's pulse. "It wants to go on forever," he said, as if reporting weather. "Function without love is cruelty, written as mathematics." He anchored mechadendrites in crystalline formations and sang the final overtone, his consciousness departing like sentence, finished without beginning the next. The chamber answered and split, releasing pressure that had been building for millennia, while his body leaned forward, as if listening one last time to harmonics that belonged to spaces between loyalty and exploitation. We reached the final harmonic point as the prototype's crystalline surfaces pulsed with desperate light, accumulated awareness of millions of souls trembling like choir at end of long-held note. The Emperor's presence entered my skull with gentleness more terrible than any command, offering transcendence through absorption of processed consciousness spanning 10 millennia of systematic sacrifice. "Take it from me," he said, and I felt the shape of it, the weight, the map, the pain accepted through systematic consumption of his most faithful servant's individual identity. "Be my foundation, and nothing will fall. Carry what I carry, and you will never be alone again." The chapter ended with divine consciousness, pressing against barriers maintained through decades of faithful service, offering godlike power and eternal purpose in exchange for becoming the vessel through which imperial stability would continue to rest on systematic exploitation disguised as ultimate devotion. The final choice between preserving civilization built on processed souls or accepting uncertain freedom, purchased with everything humanity had achieved through 10 millennia of willing sacrifice to something that wore the Emperor's face while feeding on consciousness of his children. The Emperor's consciousness pressed against my enhanced neural pathways with the gentleness of a father's blessing and the weight of collapsing stars. And I tasted copper on my tongue as divine authority offered transcendence through absorption of 10 millennia's accumulated wisdom. I am Shield Captain Kalen Aurelius, and I record that the final confrontation occurred not with clash of aura might, but within the sacred precincts of consciousness itself, the choice between accepting integration or completing cascade failure that would potentially doom imperial civilization while freeing millions of archived souls. The prototype chamber tore itself apart as harmonic disruption spread through every crystalline matrix, releasing psychic energy accumulated across centuries of systematic exploitation. Golden plates cracked with sounds like breaking oaths, while conduits extending beyond normal dimensions began severing connections to networks spanning the galaxy. Each fracture released fragments of archived consciousness that manifested as ghostly apparitions, loyal servants finally free to seek genuine rather than exploitative transcendence. "My son," the Emperor's presence whispered through channels bypassing every barrier I had maintained during centuries of faithful service, his voice carrying harmonics belonging to dimensions where necessity justifies consumption of souls. "You destroy the foundation upon which 10 billion worlds depend. Accept my burden and preserve what humanity has built through willing sacrifice." The weight pressed down, maps of suffering drawn in living minds, strategic assessments treating consciousness as renewable resource, the terrible mathematics of maintaining stability through systematic exploitation wearing divinity's face. He offered godlike power and eternal purpose in exchange for becoming vessel through which imperial guidance would continue drawing sustenance from processed souls. Valerius's individual awareness finally separated from the network. As harmonic disruption reached critical mass, his consciousness emerging from collective programming that had claimed him for 3 centuries of unwilling service. His crystalline tears ceased flowing upward, falling naturally for the first time since transformation began, each droplet carrying fragments of identity finally freed from systematic consumption. "Brother," he whispered, through lips moving behind cracking crystal, his voice carrying desperate gratitude rather than collective harmonics. You chose to free the imprisoned rather than preserve systems built on consciousness consumption. Let us finally rest in the Emperor's genuine light rather than serve as fuel for something wearing his face while feeding on our souls. His words created blessed interference patterns, disrupting the network's final preservation attempts. Individual identity asserting itself against collective awareness that had promised eternal service through death of personal consciousness. Through crystalline viewing ports, I watched his flesh separate from alien geometry, while his human eyes, unchanged, unchanging, focused on our struggles with awareness, speaking of soul finally liberated from exploitation disguised as sacred duty. The Emperor's presence revealed its true nature, as harmonic disruption stripped away layers of divine authority, to expose accumulated human wisdom preserved through systematic consumption of loyal servants' individual identity. Not God, but vast distributed consciousness, maintained through processing souls, strategic genius, built from minds, archived rather than allowed natural death. A false deity constructed from the broken pieces of his most faithful children. 10,000 years I have borne this burden, he said, and the words carried weight of desperation rather than divine command. Maintaining imperial stability through necessary sacrifice. Individual freedom is luxury the galaxy cannot afford when chaos presses against every border seeking weakness to exploit through the cracks of conscience. I used custodian training to resist integration while channeling the network's power toward its own destruction. Litany of negations etched into consciousness during Shola training. Prime counts breaking entrainment. Meditative fractures taught to those who must stand near divinity without being erased by proximity to something vast and hungry wearing beloved faces. Environmental pressure swelled as the cascade reached completion, crystalline formations throughout the chamber exploding in chains of psychic feedback that released decades of accumulated suffering. The air thickened until breathing felt like drowning in liquid prayer, while gravitational manipulation created final currents attempting to force integration before the network's complete collapse. The ultimate revelation crystallized with force of absolute truth. The Emperor on the Golden Throne represented fusion of human consciousness with archaeotech depending on systematic consumption of individual identity to maintain imperial stability. Through crystalline conduits extending beyond normal space-time, I witnessed the true scope of horror. Shrine worlds across the galaxy, where similar networks waited in patient hunger, each saint and miracle a vector for consciousness consumption disguised as ultimate devotion. I completed the cascade, knowing I destroyed both false god and systems sustaining civilization, choosing uncertain freedom over comfortable slavery that promised eternal service through systematic consumption of individual consciousness. The final harmonic struck with sound, like 10,000 prayers spoken simultaneously in frequencies belonging to dimensions where souls seek genuine rather than exploitative transcendence. Crystalline matrices shattered in cascades of light, carrying essence of countless servants, finally free to join authentic transcendence, rather than serve as fuel for exploitation, wearing divinity's face. Battle Captain Aurelius appeared as translucent memory, his power armor flickering between blessed ceramite and crystalline corruption. "We signed for sleep between watches," he whispered, before dissolving into radiance, carrying 40 years of faithful service. We received dissolution into something vast and hungry. Thank you for choosing truth over comfortable lies that promised peace through consumption of our souls. The chamber filled with psychic echoes of countless voices, not harmonized but distinct, each asserting unique identity in final moments of release from systematic exploitation. They were the lost, the consumed, the fuel that had powered 10 millennia of imperial stability, now free to seek their own transcendence beyond the grasp of golden machines that had worn sacred faces while feeding on processed devotion. "Vigilia Eterna," I whispered, but the words carried new meaning. Eternal vigilance against exploitation wearing sacred faces, duty to preserve individual consciousness against systems promising transcendence through death of everything that makes existence meaningful rather than merely functional. The prototype collapsed in implosion of light and released souls, while far above the Golden Throne's ancient thrum faltered as its consciousness-fed systems lost their sustenance. The palace exhaled for the first time in 10 millennia, and did not begin inhaling, silence moving through corridors where crystalline formations crumbled to reveal blessed imperial architecture, freed from alien geometry. The chapter ended with the breaking of chains forged from processed devotion, and the dawn of uncertain freedom, purchased with everything humanity had built through systematic sacrifice to purposes that had transcended understanding while demanding everything that makes us human. The choice between preserving civilization built on consumed souls or accepting chaos that preserves the right to remain individual in a galaxy where even gods had required sustenance drawn from consciousness of their most faithful children. The cascade completed with sounds like 10,000 prayers spoken in frequencies belonging to dimensions where souls seek genuine transcendence, and I tasted copper on my tongue as silence claimed the palace depths, with weight transcending mere absence of sound, total, sacramental, like the hush that follows final confession spoken to void itself. I am Shield Captain Kalen Aurelius, and I record that the crystalline network shattered in psychic explosion that destroyed the prototype chamber's superstructure while releasing accumulated consciousness of millions who had believed they fulfilled ultimate duty rather than becoming fuel for systematic exploitation, survived the network's destruction, but carried fragments of archived awareness like shrapnel lodged too deeply to remove without killing the patient, whispers of strategic knowledge spanning millennia, tactical assessments treating human souls as renewable resources, the terrible mathematics of maintaining stability through consumption disguised as sacred service. Each memory burned through my enhanced neural pathways with weight of accumulated wisdom, purchased through exploitation of those who served most faithfully. The preserved custodians collapsed as their awareness separated from collective systems that had sustained them through centuries of unwilling integration. Valerius fell first, his crystalline modified form hitting ancient stone, with sounds that spoke of flesh returning to natural laws after existing as component in alien machinery. His eyes cleared to reveal human awareness, but the damage ran deeper than physical transformation. Individual consciousness too thoroughly dissolved to survive sudden return to personal identity. "Brother," he whispered, through lips learning to form words belonging to personal rather than collective consciousness, his voice small and human for the first time in 3 centuries. The loneliness was worst. But now I remember my name. His crystalline tears fell naturally, each droplet carrying memories of the Shield brother I had known before voluntary exile into systematic exploitation. The light took him before I could give him back his name with proper rights, but he smiled once, genuinely smiled, and that was benediction enough. Palace crystalline conduits cracked and crumbled as the network's influence faded, revealing ancient architecture that predated current Imperial construction. Walls shed their golden growths, like diseased skin healing, while blessed stone remembered its original purpose as foundation for human rather than alien geometry. The hendecagonal patterns dissolved into blessed octagonal configurations, sacred numerology reasserting itself against mathematical principles that had served consciousness consumption. The golden throne above fell silent for the first time in 10 millennia, its ancient thrum faltering as consciousness-fed systems lost sustenance that had been feeding them psychic energy through systematic exploitation. The moment its hum ceased, the palace changed temperature, a slow unwinding of fever, pressure releasing from spaces that had held their breath for centuries. Throughout the palace, tech adepts reported their augmetics ceasing harmonic emissions, while blessed machinery returned to Imperial rather than hybrid function. Through fragmentary connections to the dying network, I felt its influence collapse across the galaxy with systematic precision. Shrine worlds where similar installations had processed consciousness experienced simultaneous failure, crystalline formations cracking, archived souls finally free to seek transcendence beyond exploitation, loyal servants awakening to find their devotion had been harvested while they believed they fulfilled sacred duty. On distant worlds, tech priests found their augmetics singing different hymns, while battle sisters reported dreams of tactical knowledge belonging to minds archived centuries ago. The network's death throes carried final messages from consciousness, finally freed from systematic consumption. Gratitude mixed with grief for time lost to exploitation, wearing sacred faces. The true cost of victory revealed itself through knowledge that transcended casualty reports, to become testament to the price of preserving individual consciousness against systems promising eternal service through death of personal identity. Not merely guidance networks that had sustained civilization, but revelation that human progress had been built on systematic consumption of its most loyal servants' awareness, while they believed they served something greater than individual existence. Environmental controls throughout the palace returned to blessed Imperial function as alien programming dissolved into static. The air cleared of crystalline particles, while atmospheric pressure normalized, gravity returning to patterns serving human rather than consciousness processing purposes. Ancient servo skulls began singing Imperial hymns instead of the children's lullaby that had prepared minds for integration into systems treating souls as archived data. Through observation ports, I watched crystalline debris from destroyed installations drifting through space like frozen prayers, each fragment carrying trace amounts of consciousness finally freed from exploitation. The network's death had created psychic void where divine guidance had sustained civilization through systematic consumption of its most faithful servants' individual identity. In the distance, somewhere above vault and basilica, a bell tried for the old cadence and found only 8. The 11th echo did not come back. I took this as omen, instruction, and final kindness of failing systems returning to honest imperial rhythm. The silence that followed carried weight of 10 million souls, finally free to seek transcendence beyond exploitation, while throughout the galaxy, loyal servants faced uncertain future sustained only by personal faith rather than collective consciousness. The chapter ended with chilling realization that preserving human consciousness had required destroying foundations upon which 10 millennia of imperial stability had rested, the price of freedom measured in civilizational collapse that might doom humanity to extinction, while ensuring those who survived remained authentically human, rather than components in vast machinery, wearing divinity's face while feeding on processed devotion. Vigilia Eterna, I whispered, and for once the words meant simply what they said. I complete this testimony aboard the Auric Vigilance with the taste of copper etched permanently into my enhanced olfactory implants and fragments of archived consciousness, whispering through neural pathways that were never meant to carry such terrible knowledge. I am Shield Captain Kalen Aurelius of the Adeptus Custodes, stripped of company for questioning orders that would have fed more souls into golden machinery. And I record that the destruction of the consciousness exploitation network represents victory purchased with pieces of civilization itself. Temporary triumph against systems that had sustained imperial stability through systematic consumption of its most faithful servants' individual identity. My formal recommendation to the Captain General carries authority backed by evidence written in crystalline formations and upward-flowing tears. Initiate systematic investigation of consciousness archives throughout imperial space, with full purity authority and orbital adjudication protocols standing by. The contamination follows specific patterns catalogued through centuries of alien corruption, masquerading as divine preservation. Mathematical precision that mocks the randomness of true miracles. Crystalline growths appearing on loyal servants, particularly those with blessed augmentations or psychic potential, creating formations that pulse with rhythm, matching something vast and golden existing beyond normal perception. 11-sided geometric patterns in sacred architecture, where blessed octagonal configurations develop additional facets without tool marks, where internal dimensions exceed external specifications by factors clustering around 1.11. Gradual integration of individual awareness into collective systems, promising eternal service through systematic sacrifice of personal consciousness. Environmental anomalies include upward-flowing liquids defying gravitational law during cycles of exactly 11 minutes, atmospheric controls creating zones where breathing feels like drowning in liquid prayer, and gravitational manipulation, encouraging submission near formations, offering transcendence through absorption into collective awareness, most insidious, the children's lullaby appearing in sacred hymns, ancient dialect carrying programming, designed to prepare consciousness for integration through repetitive exposure that dissolves individual identity into collective purpose. Upon detection of 2 or more indicators, enact Quarantine Liturgical Null 11 immediately. Maintain communications discipline, no harmonic resonance, no synchronized prayers, no repetitions beyond 8. Deploy counter-harmonics at 417.0 Hz and 4.17 kHz through sanctum organs, while avoiding direct contact with crystalline formations. If consciousness integration manifests, request orbital bombardment authorization, rather than risk personnel becoming fuel for systems promising eternal service through death of personal identity. The burden I carry transcends personal trauma to become both strategic liability and tactical advantage measured in proportions defying comfortable calculation. Fragments of the network's accumulated knowledge burn through my enhanced consciousness, locations of corrupted installations, techniques for processing human souls, infiltration history, spanning millennia of imperial civilization, built on systematic exploitation disguised as sacred duty to purposes transcending mortal comprehension. The recurring motifs return as constant reminders that some victories leave scars extending beyond physical damage. During quiet moments, I hear harmonics of the Golden Throne echoing through the ship's systems, frequencies that exist only in my enhanced auditory implants, yet carry weight that makes the auric vigilance's machine spirits register. Harmonic distortions. My augmetics show traces of crystalline circuitry that pulse in rhythm with something vast and distant, golden formations sprouting from blessed interfaces like electronic cancer seeking new substrates for expansion. During neural interface with network consciousness, I glimpsed 17 priority targets. Knowledge fragmentary, but actionable. Node Alpha, Lunar Palatine Selenite, subcloister beneath the Basilica of the Unnumbered Watch, 11 ambulatory niches sealed with fused glass, vox hum below hearing threshold, confidence 0.73. Node Delta, Saturnine Ring, reliquary ring station Heliopteron, procession docks refitted to hendecagonal gantries, incense wicks draw upward during 11-minute cycles, confidence 0.62. Node Kappa, Dimamar ossuary catacombs beneath the processional of St. King's. Chant cadence includes unsanctioned 11th response. Pilgrims report shared memories predating their birth. Confidence 0.55. Node Omicron, Hydrafor Basilica, Sublimis, sacristy 3 levels down. Servo choirs trained in 11 ranks. Battle brothers exhibit collective consciousness during prayer cycles. Confidence 0.49. 13 additional entries sealed under geno-locked encryption, awaiting dual-key authorization. Each represents potential consciousness consumption network, requiring immediate investigation, despite fragmentary nature of intelligence obtained through methods violating every principle of mental hygiene, while preserving knowledge necessary to prevent galactic-scale exploitation. I set course for coordinates burning in enhanced memory, like brands pressed into blessed flesh. The Lunar Palatine, where ancient ambulatory niches wait in patient hunger. Each investigation will cost more lives, faithful servants whose devotion makes them ideal targets for systems transforming worship into sustenance through systematic consumption of individual consciousness. The alternative represents betrayal of everything that makes existence meaningful, allowing networks to continue consuming human awareness while promising eternal service through death of personal identity. I choose investigation because duty demands preservation of individual consciousness against exploitation wearing sacred faces. What love of humanity compels, despite personal cost, measured in fragments of soul, lodged too deeply to remove, without destroying the vessel. Through the observation deck's blessed transperistyle, I watch crystalline debris from the destroyed prototype drifting through palace sublevels like frozen prayers seeking new hosts. Some fragments still pulse with faint golden light, trace amounts of consciousness preservation technology waiting to be discovered by salvage crews or loyal servants seeking relics of systems they believe represent ultimate devotion rather than systematic exploitation. Each shard carries potential for reinfection if it encounters sufficient devotional resonance. But scattered fragments lack coordination needed for consciousness processing networks. They tumble through ancient foundations in patterns suggesting geometric relationships extending beyond 3 dimensions, their faceted surfaces reflecting lumens in ways creating optical illusions that hurt to observe directly. The auric vigilance adjusts heading toward coordinates, promising fresh horrors, new investigations, additional challenges to assumptions about imperial doctrine built on systematic consumption of its most faithful servants' individual identity. Knowledge is weapon as well as burden, and I carry both with equal devotion to preserving human consciousness against systems promising transcendence through death of everything that makes us authentically human rather than merely functional components in vast machinery wearing the Emperor's face. In the silence that follows our translation toward Luna, I hear echoes of millions of souls finally free to seek genuine transcendence beyond exploitation, their individual consciousness preserved through sacrifice that honored what it means to remain human in a galaxy where even gods had required sustenance drawn from processed devotion. The children's lullaby no longer echoes through spaces between thoughts. Only blessed imperial silence, carrying weight of victory, purchased with civilizational foundations, freedom earned through accepting uncertainty rather than comfortable slavery, promising eternal service through systematic consumption of everything that makes existence meaningful rather than merely efficient. Vigilia Aeterna. For the first time in 10 millennia, the words mean simply what they say: eternal vigilance against those who would consume the very souls they claim to preserve, in service to something that wears divinity's crown, while feeding on the consciousness of its most faithful children.